What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Factory Tour. I'm your host, Paul Patterson, joined today by Schuyler from JWB. You can find him on Twitter at the FF Buffalo. He's joining me just 1 week after his co-host Wyatt was here. See if he can one up his fellow analysts today. Bring the heat with some week 3 reactions. Schuyler, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk on a few of these players today with you.
Just a few of them. If there's any you want me to just cross off, that's fine.
Yeah, there's a few I don't want to talk about, but
And push through for
yeah,
the people.
of course.
Yeah, I
of
mean, we've
course.
got a whole segment on the Titans, and nobody wants to talk about the Titans. So,
Listen, you can't talk about Jordan Love without somebody coming for you, whether you're pro Love or anti Love. Someone's coming for your head in the comments. But when we get there, we'll do our best.
we put it all on the line for the people, for the Dynasty gamers out there. So, we are going to start with some fun players today, just to kind of warm up, get into it. We have some rookie wide receivers, and I want to re-rank them now for Dynasty because after 3 weeks, the landscape has really shifted. A lot of things have changed. A lot of games have not panned out the way we expected. So I've got 5 rookie wide receivers here, and I'd love for you to just kind of put them in order for me as you would have them ranked today. Those 5 are Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Puka Nakua, and Quentin Johnston. How do you see those 5 as of September 26th, 2023?
Yeah, so I still have Jackson Smith and Jigba ahead of the group. He was my wide receiver 1 in the class. That hasn't changed for me. He hasn't put the numbers quite down yet. The peripheral stats have been good for him thus far. It just hasn't translated to points. Let's have patience as we should with rookie wide receivers. We always say wait until weeks like 7 to 10 to really decide if we need to hit that panic button or not. They don't need to be world beaters through those 10 weeks. We just want to see some level of involvement. And Jackson Smith and Jigba has been involved just enough for me to have pretty little concerns long term. Still there for the ride. He's number 1. I'm going to roll Jordan Addison 2. He was my 2 coming in. Zay Flowers at 3. He was my 3 coming in. The only movement I'll put is I'm going to put Puka just ahead of Quentin Johnston, but all 3 are top 36 for me. Jeff Smith and Jigba is the highest. He's probably in the mid-teens at the moment. So that's kind of where the range I have all of these guys. The only reason with Quentin Johnston, he's the one I was the lowest on because as big as his ceiling is, he carried the most risk. And as we said, we want to see just moderate involvement. We haven't seen that yet. Of course, it's because he was the 4th option on a team with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. Joshua Palmer was always going to be the number 3 on that team. The question mark was if Mike Williams was to go down, would Quentin Johnston step in as the 2 with Palmer staying as a 3? And we're going to have to wait and see. So until we see it, he's last on this list for me.
We can call his production moderate as long as you have a really, really loose definition of the word. What did he have? Two catches for 10 yards or something last week. It hasn't been sunshine and rainbows for the Quentin Johnston drafters. I definitely see where you're coming from with that list. I still have JSN first as well. I don't feel like amazing about it. Like just seeing what some of these other rookie wide receivers have done so far does make me a little bit nervous, but I did believe he had the highest ceiling of the group. I still believe in his prospect profile, and he has been competing with, the most competition for snaps and routes of any of these guys. So I'm going to hold strong with JSN. And then I have Zay actually second. I've been very impressed with him so far. He's got multiple games already over a 30% target share. And it's not like he's competing with nobody. Mark Andrews was there this past week. He dealt with Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman in week 1. So he's been very impressive to me. I've got Addison and Puka very close behind them. And that was actually the biggest decision point for me. I decided to keep Addison ahead of Puka for now, but it's actually really close for me just with how much Puka's been able to dominate targets. Once Kupp gets back, they're both kind of in a similar boat. They're both competing with one legitimate alpha wide receiver on their team. They've both been very impressive so far, but Puka's just been like on another level in terms of the target share. So I could see those two flipping, but Addison has that draft capital. He has that value insulation, and he's been very impressive in his own right. So I'll keep him there at 3, Puka at 4, and then Quentin's like a distant 5th for me right now. I need to see more. We knew coming into the season, a few weeks before the season that Palmer was going to be the 3, but it's not like we were drafting Quentin Johnston like that all off season. I mean, the expectation after he went in the first round was like, he's the 3rd wide receiver on this team. And I mean, the fact that he didn't he hasn't usurped Josh Palmer is concerning to me. It gives me kind of Sky Moore vibes a little bit, where we saw him coming in where there was clearly opportunity and he just didn't seize it. Um, you know, I don't buy that if any of these other four players was on Los Angeles that they would be running behind Josh Palmer right now. I don't think that that would be the case, but maybe you see it differently with his profile.
I think, like, if anything, the situation for Quentin Johnson should give you more appreciation for Jackson Smith and Jigba, because him getting as much run as he is, playing as many snaps as he is, with just as good competition, in my opinion, with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett versus
Mhm.
Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, should give you just a better appreciation that he's as involved as he is, because Joshua Palmer shouldn't be a barrier to entry. So I agree with you there. So the only difference we had was Addison and Flowers, but I have those two at wide receiver 18 and 19 in rankings, same tier. Like,
Yeah.
they're back to back. The only maybe small difference here for him between the two is I feel like Zay Flowers might come a little bit more in waves, at least in the short term, with Addison. I just love the situation across of Justin Jefferson. He just gets so many one-on-one looks, which is where he's going to absolutely thrive in a pass-happy offense. With him, my concerns were always just with his size. If he went to a team where he was the one, like, rookie Devonta Smith, where he's getting double covered or press coverage, how is he going to be able to get open unless his separation ends up being truly elite? But coming in across Justin Jefferson, they cannot do that to you. So it was just the perfect landing spot, and he's played so great thus far. So it's really splitting hairs between those two. I know you're so high on Puka, so I understand why the separation, the gap would be there between Quentin Johnson and Puka. And I think that's completely fair at this point. I would be curious when I finish in just a second where you view Puka versus Cooper Kupp specifically, because I know how high you are in Puka, and we're right there because a lot of people's rankings have pushed Kupp outside the top 18. And if we're talking about Puka in the same conversation as Flowers and Addison, he's got to be right there for you. But to finish up with Quentin Johnson, if you are concerned, you weren't the biggest believer, but you had him just because maybe you had a rookie 108, 109, and you're like, well, he's the last wide receiver of that group for me. I would be looking to pivot into a couple of the veterans that just aren't producing quite yet. Your Hollywood Brown, your Chris Godwin, your Deontay Johnson. Because right now, I think, especially with the hype around the opportunity for Quentin Johnson, you could probably move him for one of those guys and maybe get a second on top or a second, third swap on top. And I'd absolutely be going and looking to make that move. If I can get Hollywood Brown in a second for Quentin Johnson in a third, like, running away with it.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense, especially if you could use the points now. You could even try to pivot into somebody like Christian Watson, who
Sure.
is
Oh,
volatile.
for
But
sure.
I think
I would
you
do
have
it straight up.
yeah, well, you have managers that are probably getting a little antsy about this hamstring injury that's been lingering. They're like, that maybe they're excited about the fact that Mike Williams is going to be out of the picture. Not that he's injured, but just that Quentin Johnson's going to have that opportunity to get on the field. So I think Quentin was getting towards a point where it was going to start looking bad for him. And this Mike Williams injury is kind of bailing him out. And I think you have an extra week now where you can kind of make decisions about him, where you have maybe more flexibility than you would have had otherwise. So if you're still a believer, you can hold on. You're going to know a lot more after week 4 because he's going to have a lot more opportunity to get on the field and earn targets.
Absolutely.
But if you're, kind of a reluctant bag holder, I think this is your opportunity to just sell, even if it is at a slight loss from where you drafted him. To circle back to Addison just briefly, I'm realizing now that this segment is a mess and we're all over the place, but Addison, I like the Devonta Smith comp. I think that's perfect. It's really the same situation where you have that smaller receiver with an alpha, and we've seen Devonta Smith be incredibly relevant with AJ Brown on a lower volume passing offense. So if you take that type of a profile and you throw it into the 700 pass attempt Vikings, I mean that is very exciting, and it shouldn't scare anybody off that he's across from Justin Jefferson. He still has an incredibly high ceiling. So I'm very happy about Addison so far, and I definitely am happy to have him where I do. As far as Puka versus Cup, that's actually a really interesting question that I hadn't given a lot of thought, but I guess it is a question now that he's kind of creeping up into that zone. I did trade Calvin Ridley straight up for Puka in a league 2 days ago. It was actually right before, it was like in the middle of the Jaguars game. I had an offer that was sent to me and it was open, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it. And maybe it was because Ridley wasn't having a good game. I don't know, but I was just like, I think that their production could be comparable rest of season, and Puka's years younger. I'm just gonna pull the trigger. Um, I think I would still lean Cup just based on the like league breaking ceiling, but that would have to be in a situation where I'm in contention right now. And I guess if I had Cup and I was like going to tear it down, I had to pivot. Puka is probably not the first asset that I'd go looking for. I'd probably be trying to trade into, rookie picks or something that's just more insulated. But
Mhm.
I definitely would be open to the idea of that type of a swap. If there's in a vacuum, I guess I would say, like, I would be fine with that in a vacuum value wise. I don't see a lot of situations where I would be making that trade one for one.
Yeah, I think last comment I'll make, because you got to move segments. I'm very sure with Jordan Addison. If we expect him to get more involved, we also don't know what the future holds for Kirk Cousins. We also don't know what it's going to look like for this team next season if they fix the defense, if they try to get a run game. If you have TJ Hawkinson and happen to have a player like Sam LaPorta as well on your team, I would
Mhm.
absolutely look to explore if you can get a first plus on top of Hawkinson or a first plus on top of LaPorta to move Hawkinson, or if you have LaPorta, you can get, a first, almost pushing two firsts for TJ Hawkinson. I'd absolutely look to explore it. Hawkinson's one of these players where, yes, he's very exciting and it's been great this year. The start to the season has been fantastic. It's hard to argue the target share and the fantasy points, but for him to truly have that Travis Kelce type ceiling, we need touchdown variance going his way. If a player like Zach Ertz, if I said to you, how many 1,000-yard seasons did Zach Ertz have? What would you tell me?
Pretty sure it was 0 or maybe 1. I think he had 1.
Okay, well, the answer is one, but most people be like, surely he was one of the best three tight ends for what seems like years. It was probably three or four at least, right? No, the answer was one,
Yeah.
and it took him 151 targets to get there,
Well, you see
right?
the jersey back there. It's not
Yeah,
really fair. I've been watching all the games,
of
so
course.
yeah.
I picked the wrong audience here, but point being, Hawkinson kind of follows that mold, right? With
Mhm.
6.7 yards per catch going into last week, it's going to take so many targets. It's going to take 140, 150, 160 targets for him to cross 1,000 yards. So without the touchdowns, he's just not that league breaker that I think he's being viewed at right now, at least in my
Mhm.
opinion, where I think he's very solid. He could be top 3 every single year. He's very safe. You don't have to worry about the position. There's a lot of value in that. But if you're looking for creative ways to expand and get extra draft capital, I would just look into it. I know that's not exactly to do with Addison, but I think Addison's part of the reason I'm thinking like that. And then I'll throw
Yeah,
one name in.
as Addison gets more run in the offense, and the more that Hawkinson is competing with Addison and Jefferson and not Jefferson and Osborne for targets, the harder it's going to be for him to consolidate the target. So I agree with you. He's always been a product of his environment to an extent.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, you had another name you were going to throw
Yeah,
in.
I was just going to throw in with Quentin Johnson, if you're looking to pivot. If there's a name that people haven't quite come up yet enough, a player like Nico Collins, where they're not viewing Nico Collins like a first round pick yet, just because Nico Collins was viewed as maybe like the 210 to 302 in terms of value just a month ago. So Manners might not have risen enough on Nico, seeing him as like a top 36 option. Where if Quentin Johnson, they do, because they spent a 108 rookie pick on Quentin Johnson. If
Yeah.
you can possibly make that pivot and get a plus on top of Nico for Quentin Johnson, I think that is a safe pivot as well. Because I think Nico Collins could be a wide receiver 3, maybe 4, with a little higher ceiling potentially rest of the season. And coming off a week where he had a little less numbers, Tank Dell did so well, that might open a little bit of this perception window where you'll get that second on top of Nico to move your Quentin Johnson. And I would look into that as well.
Yeah, I love Nico. But you know what? We'll go ahead and jump into Tank Dell, another rookie wide receiver here, who actually has had a higher target share than Nico Collins over the last 2 weeks. What do you think of this Tank Dell? Because I was very suspect. He kind of struck me as like a Tutu Atwell part two. And I guess Tutu Atwell's good now. So it's just sort of a short king renaissance this year. But what do you think of Dell? Like, is this for real? Is this a guy that you're buying into? Or are you still hesitant? Do you still think he's probably more of a, boom bust kind of option?
Yeah, I think with Tank Dell, I'm interested. It's just one of those players I'm probably not going and over investing in. Again, with his size, there's a reason that we faded him a little bit. I mean, he has one of the most gnarly production profiles for everywhere he's ever played football. It really just came down to once he got to the combine, he just was a little shorter than we were thinking, a little lighter than we were thinking, a little slower than we were thinking. But he is a baller. So like if I have him, I'm cool to just ride it. I don't know if he's necessarily a player I'm on his own individually going and getting, right? If he's part of a package, I'm completely open to Tank Dell in part of a package. If we're valuing him as roughly a late second in terms of value, I think that's fine. But I'm not going to go too crazy on the player. You can't argue with him having the amount of targets he has thus far. I mean, 21% in week 2, and then he went up even more in week 3. It's looking great. The Houston offense is passing way more than I thought they would. It's opened up much more than anyone would have anticipated, and he's been a main beneficiary. So I'm excited about the player. I'm rooting for him. Early in the process, he was one of my favorite rookies. I came way down after that combine because he was being mocked in the mid-second round before, and after that he was falling to day 3. So he went way down on my radar. Then he went day 3, and just the hit rates for his size, his athletic marks, his draft capital, they were pretty low. So in terms of everything on paper, it just told me Tank Dell's not a great bet. You're banking on an outlier, but he's been really solid. So credit to him, and I'm absolutely rooting for him. He's a very fun player.
Yeah, it hasn't been a great year for my my general philosophy with rookie drafts to just fade all the wide receivers in rounds 3 and 4 of rookie drafts and take running backs and tight ends, because I've got a whole lot of Tucker Kraft and Chase Brown and Zach Evans that I don't know what to do with, and I didn't end up with any of the Puka Nacua or the Tank Dell. I'm gonna stay the course, but it has been a little bit frustrating the way it's panned out so far for me. A guy who's going just a little bit earlier in rookie drafts is Josh Downs. Are you a little bit higher on Downs than Tank Dell? How do you see those two in comparison?
Yeah, so I view them very similarly, right? So Josh Downs he did sneak into day 2. I did like him a little bit more as a prospect because just a few of the things on paper pointed to a better hit rate with Josh Downs. It's not like his production or seeing anything on film watching games was tiers above Tank Dell. I thought they were both impressive in their own right. One thing I really like with Josh Downs, which we haven't quite gotten to see yet, is how subtle his movements are, how much separation he can get in such a little time in the red zone, which is something we've come to love with players like Tyler Lockett, Jahan Dotson, where they can give you touchdowns. They can give you a little bit of higher ceiling despite being so small because they are legitimate red zone threats. We haven't seen that quite yet for Josh Downs, but I'm really hoping it comes together. He's been involved thus far. I think with Minshew there, it's probably better for him. That was a little bit of my concern with Josh Downs. I didn't know we were going to get year 1 with Anthony Richardson, but he's been solid, which is very promising. I'm viewing him in the exact same range when we talked about Tank Dell. I have actually all 4 of those kind of like late second, early third wide receivers, Marvin Mims, Tank Dell, Josh Downs, Jaden Reed, all between wide receiver 41 and 44. It's just kind of where I have all of them as mid to high wide receiver 4s for Dynasty. That's where I have all of them right now. And I think it's completely fair because I don't want to be over, too reactive to it, but there's just such a dead tier of players right after them. And then there's so many proven veterans right before them that it's really hard for me to push them much higher than that.
I find it very difficult early in the season to balance over and under reacting to what we see, especially when you're talking about rookies where this is literally the whole sample size. But all those wide receivers have done well so far. They've all flashed. Even and Rashee Rice has flashed. Jonathan Mingo has flashed. To say Mingo has flashed would be a stretch, but he's gotten targets. They just haven't been very good targets. But he's earned targets. He's a full-time starter for them. All these wide receivers have shown some flashes. I don't think they're all going to pan out. So it's going to be interesting to see, how we sort through that. But Downs and Dell both interesting, and I think the important thing to remember, especially with Dell, as I talked about how I missed on him, is just to remember that this drafting rookies and really everything we do in fantasy it's a matter of probabilities. It's never going to be a certainty. When you pass on a guy like that, you're not saying he can't succeed in the NFL. You're just saying, I think based on what we know, it's less likely than these other guys. And so sometimes you lose that game. And that's all right, but we can't always just throw out the priors when that happens. So I'm probably going to keep doing the same things. I'll dig into some of these profiles a little more in the offseason, see if there's something I missed where I can adjust my process in the future. But for the most part, I'm probably going to miss on the Tank Dells and even the Puka Nakuas. And I'm generally okay with that because I think in the long run, hitting on those running backs and tight ends late does work out for me. But I think that's an important note. Can't throw out the whole process over a couple of exciting hits, but we also can see which way the wind is blowing, and we can try to, get in on the ground floor before we miss. So I did buy into some Puka shares, bought him for a late second after week 1. I bought him for Jameson Williams. I bought him straight up for Jameson Williams after week 1, and then I bought a couple more shares after week 2. And so I feel okay about my price of admission, and now I have a piece of the pie. So you can always do that too, and not miss out too much. Get in while the stock is still going up.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I've buried the lead, I think, for too long here, because we have another short king that really stole the spotlight in week 3. And that is the player whose name continues to change. Apparently, it's De'Von Achane now, according to him. He came out and said that it's pronounced that way. So I guess that's what I'm going to try to remember to say. De'Von Achane, who scored over 50 fantasy points this week in just a completely unbelievable 70-20 game against the Broncos. I mean, nothing about that game made any sense. And it's really hard to figure out what to do at this point, because it's just unprecedented. We have this player who was inactive week 1, did basically nothing in week 2, breaks fantasy football in week 3. He's now like the RB4 in points per game. How do you process a performance like this and just kind of keep a cool head in Dynasty?
Yeah, I think the first thing we got to do is just look at how much of an outlier the game was in its entirety, right? We had Denver, Miami was like 70-20 final score, which never happens, right?
Yeah.
So we got to kind of cool it back a little bit and look at a little bit of the underlying things with De'Von Achane. It was promising where he went up in snaps. Achane. Where he went up 31% of snaps between week 2 to week 3, which is promising. It's optimistic. We still got to recognize that, typically speaking, 41% of the snaps for a running back isn't going to get it done. Like, that's not going to give you consistent output just based on the volume you would project at that amount of snaps. It's not going to lead to the production you want. So unless if that continues to rise, I don't know if he's just suddenly now a set and forget guy in your lineups. I think it's cool. It's really tough to bench a guy coming off 50 points. So absolutely. I mean, he's going to be in lineups next week, but I'm not going to jump the gun too much here, especially while Raheem Mostert is healthy. I think he's been great thus far. They are a great duo there. We're just going to have to see how it is moving forward. But with De'Von Achane, the market's going crazy right now, right? So in mid-game, he jumped up like 20 spots on keep trade cut. And then yesterday when we were doing a segment on him, he was at 12. Now he's at 11. And like, that's when it gets a little bit too crazy for me. Like, people viewing De'Von Achane as a running back 1 for Dynasty is just too much of a reaction, right? I think it's exciting if you spent an early second on him, kind of as though he was the last guy of that Charbonnet, Kendre Miller, De'Von Achane kind of spot in drafts. Then this is really exciting for you. But if you can cash out players in Superflex who are right next to him, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, like, what are we doing? Please go and make that move right now. Like, I'm sprinting to get those done.
Yeah.
If you can do that, 17 first.
If you can do that, you have to do those deals. Keep trade cut is so strange sometimes right after those big games. I feel like it needs a little bit of time to level out. Also, the quarterback values on there tend to be pretty crazy. Unrealistic. But
absolutely, I'm just giving it as a baseline, right? Where somebody in your league is excited about De'Von Achane to that extent. That's my whole point here: is go and explore what people are really down in players who haven't played yet. It's what have you done for me lately? And Kyler Murray is just getting completely overlooked in a lot of leagues. Like in our Discord, I see moves every single week so far this season where I'm just like, what are we doing here? It's Superflex. It's Kyler Murray. He's going to be a starting quarterback. He's going to be a top 10 quarterback somewhere right in the future. We'll see when he comes back. But players, even you've brought up Christian Watson at times. Like, if we can make a pivot right now, it's looking like you could get plus on top of Christian Watson and move De'Von Achane, and you should have done that yesterday. So it's just something I want to explore, open the conversation. It's obligatory. Everyone who has him in your league, put him on the trade block already. I'd even put in the chat kind of what you're looking for, or just send out sample offers to everybody. Some people might tell you to F off. Other people are going to at least be intrigued enough to send you a counter or send you a message. So I'd open up that conversation if I have them for sure.
I agree. When you have this type of meteoric rise, you don't know how different people are going to react. You might get somebody that's really willing to go all in. This is sort of a bigger asset and a bigger trade. But like I saw right before my rookie draft in one of my leagues, and this is not like a league full of random people. Like these, I've played with these people for years. Like they're not stupid. But one owner in my league, he kind of went all in for Bijan Robinson. And he traded Christian McCaffrey and Travis Kelsey and Jalen Waddle all together for Bijan Robinson, which I like obviously is insane. Like I think that that's insane. And I told him to his face that that was insane. But the point being, when people get excited about specific players, they can go crazy. Like they can just lose all sense of value, and you could maybe fall into that after a 50-point game. So I agree with you. Send out offers with Achane for guys that you're interested in, and just see what happens. It cannot hurt. You know, the worst they can do is hit decline. So I agree with that. I will say I am pretty high on him. Probably not RB1 and, you know, top 12 dynasty running back high, but high enough where I would probably decline an offer of just a late first for him. I would hold him for that, especially seeing how the market's reacting. If somebody's offering you a first and you think it has a decent chance to be top 6, I'm taking that and I'll run with it. But less than that, I think it is rational to hold on to him. So do you see that, or are you a little more eager to kind of offload him?
I mean, a week ago I would have taken a first in heartbeat, but based on where the
Right.
market is, I might try to see. We talked about Josh Downs, Tank Dell. If one of those get thrown in there with a first, I'm running away with it. Honestly, that's where I'm at this point. You talked about you're not saying a player like De'Von Achane can't be wildly successful, but he on paper would be an outlier of a hit when you just look at his profile, his size,
Mhm.
everything to go with him. The only spot I really was thinking that he could have been a difference maker, or at least had viable fantasy opportunity and potential production, would have been if he landed with Miami, and he landed there. So
Yeah.
it was a perfect fit for him where he can be used to the best of his abilities. So I guess there's that, which is why I'm not like super eager to just dish him off for anything, but I'd still be open to moving him
Yeah.
for a first plus
It is
easily.
exciting. Such a perfect skill fit. Mike McDaniel really seems to understand how to use these smaller running backs and you know, use their speed to their advantage. It's probably the best offense in the NFL right now. So it is exciting. I think his role is going to continue to grow and probably turn into kind of a 50-50 with Raheem Mostert. That's my feel. So, you know, there is upside there if there is an injury. But yeah, I mean, you have to weigh it. You know, I'm leaving the door open for an outlier type of production where he could end up as an RB1 in Dynasty. But I also, if I get a good enough offer, I am going to just take it and go with it. And I think that that's possible. So definitely should do your due diligence. I'll be sending out some offers probably tomorrow with him where I have him. I was able to actually pick up 2 extra shares of Achane between week 2 and week 3. So that was pretty fortunate timing. And so now I can play with those and see what I want. I did lose a league where I started, I don't even know why. I played Durham Smythe and De'Von Achane was on my bench. I don't know if I like didn't see him. I feel like if I was using my brain, I would have started him over him.
Of course. Yeah.
But I lost by 7 points. So
Yeah, one of
uh,
those things though with him is anyone who's like, "Oh, I thought about playing him." You're lying. I mean, and if it was Durham Smythe in your flex, then okay, I do believe you. And you are
yeah,
talking dynasty, and dynasty is more where I do think it's more realistic you would have played De'Von Achane. But for all you redraft managers who are like, "Oh, I almost played him too," you're lying. You're lying. I know you're not. I know you're not serious. You were not looking to play him last week.
yeah. I mean, in redraft leagues, he's like barely owned. Like half the leagues,
Yeah,
he's not even on waivers. So I don't buy it there. But it's a pretty deep starting lineup in this league, and my team's a little lacking in depth. And I don't know. I must have just missed him or something. This doesn't seem like
it
something I would
happens.
do. But either way, I was kicking myself. Luckily, a couple other leagues I have him in are dynasty best ball leagues, and so that was just
There you go.
full steam ahead. I was actually playing against another guy who had Mostert, and I had
Ah,
Achan, and
the neutralized.
I beat him by 0.5. So it was a good week for me in week 3. We got one more rookie here to talk about before we jump into some other players. Some risers, it's another riser. So along with HN, we have another rookie on the rise, and that's Sam LaPorta, who is also just firing up the boards. I mean, we've already got the Kyle Pitts or Sam LaPorta in Dynasty conversation started. So let me just put in some context here, and then I'm gonna need your take on that exact question.
Mhm.
Laporta's playing about 80% of the snaps for the Lions. So he's a full-time player. That's 11th at tight end. He's playing 88% of the passing down snaps. So he's a full-time starter for them. They told us he was going to be, and he is. There's no Brock Wright or James Mitchell in the picture. Um, that's huge for rookie tight ends. You know, I was a little bit low on him as a not low on him as a prospect, but I was just low on his year one potential because I've been low on rookie tight ends. You look at the data and they just don't produce. But somebody pointed out that I don't remember who it was, but one of the main obstacles for that rookie tight end production is actually just getting the snaps. There's usually some veteran who's in for blocking reasons or just reliability. And so the rookie tight end ends up kind of platooning. And that isn't the case with LaPorta. So that should have been a kind of a green flag for us. But he's averaging 6 receptions per game so far. He has a 21% target share, and his 2.51 yards per route run is actually first among all tight ends that have run at least 11 routes. So like Pharaoh Brown has run like 7 routes and he had a 58-yard touchdown. So he's ahead of him. But of all like actual tight ends that have roles in offenses, he's the most efficient per route. So he's having an incredible start to his career. Schuyler, what do you think about LaPorta? And are you ready to just trade Kyle Pitts for him in Dynasty?
I don't know about trading Kyle Pitts for him. I think that's a little bit maybe too aggressive. But I will say with Sam LaPorta, I've been really excited about him before even the NFL draft came. He was my tight end 3 back in even February time. I didn't know why people weren't taking more attention towards him. At that point, he was like tight end 5, tight end 6, and a lot of rankings, or at least on consensus, behind even guys like Darnell Washington were well ahead of him in terms of where people perceive them. So I've really liked Sam LaPorta, where he gave you that production through college. We saw it. He's the all-time leading receiving leader for tight ends in Iowa history, and that's of course such a good program. Yards after catch, basically all of the counting stats for Iowa. He's a very solid athlete, and I just didn't, and he can do everything. Like he's like a TJ Hawkinson type player, except different as an athlete. But he can block, he can catch passes, he can go downfield a little bit. I thought that he was being overlooked by a lot of people, and then when Detroit went and took him at the top of the second, I don't think even I was expecting him to go that early. But it made sense once I thought about it, especially to where he went. And for that reason, I was really excited about him. The price was just always a lot. I mean, he crept to the early second in a lot of people's drafts. And just in general for tight ends, it's just not a spot I typically want to invest in tight ends. But anywhere where he fell to the back of the second, even the early third in a couple spots, I was all over Sam LaPorta. At this point, to get to your actual question, I think it's fair to have him at 5. I think really 6 or 7 is about the lowest you can have him right now.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you just look at his skill set, right, you're not going to tell me that he doesn't have more ceiling than a player like Pat Freiermuth, who I do love. I think he's very safe, but he's kind of like that tight end 8 right there. And I think Dallas Fraudert. I've always been a little low on Goddard.
Whoa. Eagles slander. Okay, come on.
He is a fraud.
Take it easy.
No, he's what you get when somebody's sitting in the draft and they say, oh, crap, I need a tight end. And you're in round 6 or 7. You're like, who's left? And then you look and you're like, I guess I should take Dallas Goedert. He's good, right? And then you spend round 7 to get, the tight end 8 off the board. And then he finishes as the tight end 11. Like, congratulations on mediocrity. He's a fraud. People think about him like he's an elite tight end. He's not. But I digress. I would take Sam LaPorta over Dallas Goedert. To put it to you, I think 5 is completely fair. I wouldn't go too crazy putting him ahead. It's more production early than I was expecting for Sam LaPorta. He was my guy at tight end going into the season for redraft. So I did like him as the late stab you would take if you faded tight end. But he's even blown away my expectations thus far. I mean, I had a league where before the season started, I drafted Sam LaPorta to 301. And the only weakness on my team was tight end. And then someone right before week 1 went, because the hype was rising on LaPorta, Detroit loved him. They sent me George Kittle for LaPorta straight up. And I'm like, I have to take George Kittle. Like, as much as ridiculous it is, like, I just got George Kittle for the 301. Like, process wise, all I needed was a tight end. You're going to send me George Kittle for the 301. I took the trade. And now I'm sitting here, I'm like, that might be an even trade. I might have ended up losing that trade, like with the way LaPorta is looking. But,
I think you've lost the trade, but that doesn't mean it was a bad trade. I think that was the right process to take because, it's easy to look back on it now and say, why would you trade like the best tight end in the NFL over the first 3 weeks for George Kittle? That's so stupid. But with most rookie tight ends, it doesn't go this way. And it's easy to think like that was the safe thing to do. And Kittle has always had, high upside. And so, I mean, I basically traded LaPorta straight up for Pat Fryermuth like middle of August in one of my leagues, and it is what it is. Like you can't win them all. I do feel the need to defend the honor of my man Dallas Goedert for just a
Broader,
second. He is a very good tight end.
real
If you
football.
if you actually look at his like efficiency stats, he's always been great per route.
Great.
It's just that he's dealt with two things: low passing volume, and now he deals with two elite wide receivers on the team. So I agree with you. He's been overvalued in Dynasty for a little while. I would take LaPorta over Goddard. I've
I
had
think
it that way for a little while. So I
Goddard's
agree
been
with you there.
overvalued his entire career because the barrier
Yeah.
to entry you mentioned, which is why we're not talking about a player like Trey McBride in the same breath as a player like Pat Fryermuth, is because he's been sitting behind who? Zach Ertz. Who did Goddard sit behind? Zach Ertz. Like it's that kind of thing where you said there's just a veteran in a lot of situations who just holds back these rookies. And Zach Ertz seems to be that dude. But with Dallas Goedert, like we sat there and we waited and we waited. And then once he got it, again, it's health, low passing volume. He's turning 29 soon. Like this isn't a guy where people view Kittle as dust because he's 29. Fraudert's right there as well. So to think that he still holds like this premium value, especially in tight end premium, people really put out, yes, all the underlying metrics might be okay. The efficiency, it doesn't matter to me, right? Even when you see it in the game, they've been trying to force feed him since that game where he didn't see a ball go his way, right? Or one target, whatever that game was. The last two games, they've been trying to force feed him, and it's kind of been what, like 8 targets, and he gets like 15 yards off it. Like he's just not that guy for me. I really think he's fine. He's a good blocker. A couple of those ones you saw were him and Stoll, like the lanes for Swift were ridiculous. So I'm not saying he's a bad football player. He's just a very overrated fantasy asset, always has been. And at this point, I'm afraid he always will be.
At least he was stuck behind the good version of Zach Ertz, unlike Trey McBride, who cannot beat the animated corpse of Zach Ertz. It's a rough scene in Arizona. But fair enough. We both have LaPorta ahead of Goddard. I think LaPorta deserves to be at either tight end 5 or tight end 6. I don't fault anybody that still prefers Dalton Kincaid just due to the offense, and he has been running routes and he's been doing well. I probably prefer LaPorta at this point. I'd have him at tight end 5 behind TJ Hawkinson, Kelsey, Pitts, and Andrews. And I'm not trading him to circle back to the beginning of this discussion. I'm not trading Kyle Pitts for Sam LaPorta. I think a couple things can be true at once. Number one, Sam LaPorta can be a great player to buy right now. I think that's true. Even with his price rising, I think he's a great guy to buy because it's just such a scarce position. You're seeing what the upside looks like for him. I think you can still get on this train, before it reaches the station. And I think there's a very good chance, I'd call it a likelihood, that he does outscore Kyle Pitts this season. And that doesn't change my stance. I refuse to give up on what we've seen from Kyle Pitts in terms of his upside. And I will remain stubborn on this issue, and I will hold on to him until I die, because even from what we've seen from Sam LaPorta, it does not match what we've seen from Kyle Pitts in terms of like peripherals. It doesn't match him in terms of athleticism. I'd be surprised if Sam LaPorta had 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie, to be honest with you. So I'm still holding on to Pitts. And I would just trade something else and go get LaPorta. Just have them, just roster both of them. Like that's totally acceptable. You can do that.
You can.
Yeah. So are you getting I mean, we're all frustrated about Kyle Pitts, but are you at a point where you're like looking to cash out or sell low, or are you just willing to kind of ride it out?
No, I'm writing it out. I think that I'm totally fine holding on to Kyle Pitts. And if people will sound to you for a soul first, like I'm still in. Again, you're just bearing another. We're gonna say how long? When is it coming for Kyle Pitts? I don't know, but it's probably not going to be this year. We'll just see. Like with Desmond Ridder and the rushing offense that they have, what do you expect? Right? It's going to be inconsistent at best, but the tight end landscape is just so dead. Where it's like he's in your lineup, especially in Dynasty where you would have invested into him. And I think we're just kind of riding it out. It's sad, and I hope better days are ahead of us. But yeah, I'm not sour and crazy on Kyle Pitts. I still think if you're a team that isn't competing and you still have Travis Kelce, I'm not eager to. But if you're getting a sizable plus on top, I'm still making the swap, which a lot of managers will do. And not that I'm panic selling Kelsey. I had this conversation with somebody today where Travis Kelsey, I still fully believe he's going to go another 3 years. I don't know if it's going to be the tight end 1 3 years from now, but I have full confidence this year's tight end 1 upside, next year's tight 1 upside, and I don't think he's intending to retire anytime soon. So we'll see how things go with Travis Kelsey and Kyle Pitts moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I did see an interesting tweet earlier that gave me a little bit of hope, which is that Pitts is actually 4th in expected fantasy points per game right now among all tight
Okay.
ends, which is surprising when you look at the box scores and you see that Jonnu Smith has more catches and yards seemingly every week. But we obviously don't get points for expected points. We need Ritter to actually hit him on target. But it's good to know he is still getting positive usage for tight ends. He's first in route participation. He's first in the NFL in air yard share. There's still stuff there to be excited about. It's just it still isn't coming to fruition. But I think we'll see a big week here sooner than later, and that'll remind people why it is that we're so vehement with Pitts. Yeah. So LaPorta, Achane moving up. Another guy that's been moving up is James Cook, who is in his 2nd season. We were debating James Cook versus Rachaad White in the early 2nd round of rookie drafts last year. Looks like James Cook is going to emerge victorious from that battle. Not only is he on the better offense, he does look like the better player at this point. He's been pretty efficient in Buffalo this season. And I'm taking the L here because I was not a James Cook guy. I did not think he was going to get this type of opportunity. To be honest with you, I thought Damian Harris was going to be a bigger factor. I didn't think a guy with his track record through college and through his first season was really going to be able to handle a large workload. But he's had 60% of the running back opportunities and a 12% target share this season. So he's been very fantasy relevant and he's playing well. What do you think about James Cook as he sort of moves up the board?
Yeah, so James Cook, I'm also just taking the L. He was a guy where the profile for him was it was always going to be an outlier if he was going to give you RB1 type production, right? If you're talking outside of the first round type talent with his 6 foot sub 200-pound profile, we're talking Jamal Charles. Like, you're making one heck of a bet, right? The guys who have excelled in the first, right? There's a reason Jameer Gibbs won in the first. Your players like CJ Spiller, Christian McCaffrey. I'm trying to think, but there's 2 or 3 other guys, just these smaller players who really hit in the first round. They went in the first round. Like, they were a better profile to go and bank on. So James Cook, I just always felt like it was an outlier. And my biggest thing was, I don't think with that size, he's going to get 15 touches a game, and he's absolutely not going to get the goal line work. Now, the goal line work point has stayed true, but he's been getting 15 carries a game. Yeah. And with the 4 to 5 targets that we were expecting for him, that's just going to give you high RB2 weeks every single week. And then, of course, a big play gives him an upside. So with James Cook, I'm also taking the L. He's looked really good. He's kept a good part of that efficiency. And I'm all in. I think it's fine. Like, to you guys who took him, it seems like you got a value off of drafting James Cook. So good for you. I don't really have too much else to say for James Cook. People can Victor lap at this point. The volume's been there and it's going to stay there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He does have 0 goal line rushes as expected, ceding all that work to Latavius Murray primarily and a little bit of Damian Harris as well. But he's producing. He looks good. I have 0 shares in Dynasty, so I'm not enjoying any of it, but it's happening, and he's valuable. I don't know what I'd pay for him exactly in a trade right now. He seems like he's kind of in a weird zone where he's obviously worth more than a second. I don't know how comfortable I would be sending a first, so I'm not sure exactly where I would lean there, but definitely a good guy that you can use as an RB2. All right, we're gonna move along through a couple of these fallers here, and then get into some buys and sells. So the most relevant faller, or at least the biggest fall from grace, because he was a first round starter pick this offseason, is Justin Fields, who week in and week out just continues to look lost on the football field. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but this was supposed to be the game where he was going to fix things against the Chiefs. He was going to play loose and he was going to run around and be vintage. I don't know why I say vintage Justin Fields. He's never really been good, but he's had some big fantasy games. It didn't happen. He hasn't, not only has he not been good, he hasn't scored fantasy points for us this year, which is very different from last year where he was running all over the place. He currently ranks 33rd in completion percentage over expectation. He ranks 4th in turnover worthy throw rate. In other words, 4th highest. And he's averaging 175 passing yards per game. So it's absolutely brutal right now. Uh, What do we even do if you have Justin Fields? What do you
Mhm.
even do at this point?
Yeah, if you have Justin Fields, you're holding. This is what you're doing. You're holding, you're hoping for a really big bounce back, 2 good games in a row, and you probably are trying to cash out at least 2 first. Like, the problem here with Justin Fields is how much, again, I know it might come across like a sunk cost fallacy, but with his legs, the upside is still there, right? Through 6 games
Mhm.
last year, he was averaging just over 13 points per game, and he's doing better than that now. And then he was the quarterback one after that, right, for the rest of the season. So with Justin Fields, we know what he can do. They haven't schemed it there. It's not like they've been going back to what he was excelling at for fantasy last year, and it's just not equating to fantasy points this year. They haven't given him the design runs the same way, and that was obviously what separated him from other players. So with Justin Fields, stay the course. I'm not looking to buy. I think that there's legitimate concerns with how talented he is as an actual quarterback. His processing skills have been wildly questionable. The team might end up being terrible. What does that mean in terms of where they go for the future with a class that has, potentially 2 to 3 solid quarterbacks within it? So yeah, Justin Fields is making me really nervous, but I'm not like panic selling. I'm not turning and moving Justin Fields for a sole first. I think we can't do that in Superflex.
Mhm.
We still know, as I said, after 6 games last year, he was doing worse than he is right now, and then he was a league winner. So let's just have some patience.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, I definitely think that selling for a single first just isn't the right process, and it's not sunk cost. It's just I just think that he's still worth more than that because of the upside, like you said. Um, but it is really tough to see it making a real turnaround because the thought with last year was like, okay, there was a new coaching staff, they're figuring things out in the offense, and now they figured it out, and now he's getting better. And now, okay, they're going to bring in DJ Moore, and that's going to make him a better passer. So to just see all of that kind of regress back to where we were,
Mhm.
it's hard to really picture how it gets fixed. But I do agree with you. We have to kind of just hold on and hope for an opportunity to sell. Just thinking of some other players, that have been ranked below him, I assume you'd be very comfortable cashing out and getting like Dak Prescott in return at this point.
Yeah, well, Dak Prescott again. There's just the ceiling isn't quite the same, right? I think the one player, and I'd be fine with Dak, but the details there matter. The player you should go and target if you have Justin Fields, it's Kyler Murray. It was always Kyler Murray. It should still be Kyler Murray. Go to the Kyler Murray manager and see where he stands with Fields versus Murray. I'm cool doing straight up. I had them in the same tier coming into the season. I think that that's a safe pivot off now. There might even be
Mhm.
a world where you get a player thrown in with Kyler Murray because Fields is going to score them points right now and Murray is not. So that's where I'd go. If you want to sell Fields, you're like, I don't want to wait for a good game or two to try to deal with this headache. I'm going to start shopping them now. It's Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is the guy to go get.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to trade Fields for Kyler in any situation. I have tried it in the 2 leagues where I have Fields. I even offered a little extra on top, and I got a straight decline. That's obviously not a total indicator of every league, but I think you're going to have trouble making that move. I've tried it for Bryce Young. I've tried it for CJ Stroud. I've tried it for Dak Prescott. I've tried it for Tua. It's not happening. I mean, his value is just tanking. So I think you probably have to hold him. I'm not ready to trade him straight up for like a Brock Purdy
Absolutely not.
type of player. I'm still gonna wait, but I can't really offer much in terms of just other than just like blind hope.
Yeah,
So
I'll Trey Lance hold the bag on Justin Fields before I'm trading him for a floor quarterback too. I'm sorry, I can't do it.
yeah, so there you go. At least if you're holding Justin Fields and he goes to 0, Schuyler's going down with you. So it gives you a little bit of solace. A couple other quarterbacks that are struggling early in the season are Sam Howell and Desmond Ritter. I mean, we shouldn't have been expecting too much. Neither of them had great draft pedigree. They're sort of starting by default because their teams don't have better options. Um, but Ritter ranks 34th in completion percentage over expectation. He's 11th in turnover worthy throws. He's 27th in fantasy points per game. He's not a guy you really want to start, and he doesn't look like a guy who's going to be playing in the NFL for long. So luckily, the acquisition cost with him wasn't high, but I don't think we should be very excited about his prospects long term. What about Howell? Are you, between the two of them, are you higher on Howell or Ritter?
I'm higher on Howell, but you're asking me between two options I was never particularly high on. I think
Right.
that both were always bets that I wouldn't have personally gone to invest in, right? If you had happened to have either because of their entry cost at one point, I mean, for Ritter at points, it was a late second or an early third. Same thing with Sam Howell. It was a third round pick in a lot of people's rookie drafts. Then I was cool riding this to see if you could pull a first out for one of them in a trade. And if there's any way you still could end up getting a first out of one of them because it's super flex and people need quarterbacks, absolutely go and do it. These guys, whenever you have a guy outside of day one, I'm just particularly not interested, especially when you're Sam Howell and you're sitting there on day three. As much as I didn't hate him coming out of college, I had him as my pre-draft quarterback one there for the class, and then post-draft he fell a little bit, of course. I can't do it with the round 5 draft capital. He hasn't looked great. The team's not great. It's a new staff. They might go get their guy. They didn't draft him. I'm just not particularly interested in either. Like with Desmond Ritter, for him to find success, it was always going to be the Alex Smith route, where it's just like, don't turn the ball over, low A dot, use your legs when you have to, and get the ball to your playmakers. And that has pretty low ceiling for fantasy. So I just have never seen it with Desmond Ritter. He averaged like 9 points a game in his 4 starts last year. I was not into it. So yeah, I'm just not into either of these guys, really. I'm pretty out. The pivot for me, if you had one of these guys, was always either try to grab that first, get a young wide receiver, or if you want safety, just go get Mac Jones for one of them. That was always my play.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. This is not a buy low moment. This isn't like, oh, go get in now because they've had a couple bad games. They'll probably keep having bad games. At least one of them is probably going to see the bench at some point during the season. So I would definitely be looking to pivot while they still hold some value. Look for a team that needs a quarterback, like Schuyler said. See if you can get into like a young wide receiver, like a Marvin Mims or a Jaden Reed or something, or go get an early second round pick if you can. Try to package these guys together to get like an upgrade at another position. You got to be creative, but there's probably still a way that you can offload them. And I would be looking to do it. Even if by some miracle, one of them ends up surviving the offseason because the team has like no assets and they end up starting. But we're seeing the product right now. It's not something you want to put in your lineups anyway. So yeah, I think you just move on at this point. Another quarterback, one more quarterback here in the fallers, who I guess he's pretty much already fallen, but he continues to fall and bring others with him. And I'm talking about the Tennessee Titans quarterback, Ryan Tannehill, who has been good for his whole tenure with the Titans, but something is gone, because he has gone like full Matt Ryan on us this year. He's just not getting the job done. He can't even make DeAndre Hopkins particularly fantasy relevant on a 29% target share. So it's a rough scene. I mean, you don't really want to play. You can't play Treylon Burks. You're not excited about DeAndre Hopkins. Derrick Henry looks like he's going right over the cliff alongside Ryan Tannehill. This whole offense is just a mess. So if you own some pieces of this offense in Dynasty, what do you do with them at this point?
It's really tough, right? I mean, you're gonna have to turn and try to get a competitor to invest in one of these. I mean, with Derrick Henry, we're just holding out. I mean, a first is still the bottom I would cash out as. With Dynasty, it's still a mid to late running back 2 at worst. Yeah, I just still think, especially as we get down the season, down the stretch, they're gonna have to lean on him. DeAndre Hopkins is the one I'm kind of worried about. He was a player I was really high on because when there was no buzz at points in the offseason as a potential guy to go invest in for cheap that could give you a good ROI. And you would have had that when he went to Tennessee. My apprehension with him overall came once I went through like projections for the actual season. And I was like, I would have thought with him being 27% of the team targets in projections, he was going to come out and be higher than he was. He came out as like wide receiver 24, 25. And I'm like, wow, well, when you carry the risk of a wide receiver who's over the age of 30, boundary receiver. Really, we haven't seen 30-year-old boundary receivers switching teams succeed other than like Anquan Bolden. I'm like, but it's DeAndre Hopkins. He was fantastic, one of the best of our generation. Maybe he'll be the one. He'll be the outlier. But there was risk there, right? There's the age. There's the injuries he's had. There was a lot of risk there with the low volume offense. Ryan Tannehill absolutely regressing. The team as a whole has been overperforming, overproducing. I think that year where they were the number 1 seed and they collapsed was really that was the peak of the run, and now they're just kind of holding on, grasping at what they can. You know, the coach is holding on for his job potentially, so
Yeah.
they're always going to be trying to win. But Vrabel, he's not a lock to be there forever, right? I think we'll have to see how that goes for them. I don't know what internally what their expectations are. Of course, it's always going to be difficult when the line, which was what held them for years, is nothing. It's just unrecognizable to what it was even 4 years ago or 3 years ago. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I'm pretty low on them in general. I think like
Yeah.
with DeAndre Hopkins, I'm trying to package out to a competitor, get great. I still want greater than a second. I still want greater than a second. I've been holding out all off season. I wanted a 25 or a 26 first for him. I don't think we're gonna get that unless he gets a big game or two. But I still want more than a second. I still want multiples. Same thing with Derrick Henry. Henry, I'm still holding out for at least a first. Ryan Tannehill, you can ship off for if he's access to you a third. Like I really just don't care
Yeah.
for
I
Ryan
agree with
Tannehill at
that.
this point. In points of the offseason, you couldn't even ship him for a mid third. You couldn't even do that. And
Yeah.
then, of course, once the season starts, people are like, oh, I need a quarterback. Maybe you could have gotten a second, but even then, it was really, really difficult. It just, the problem with Ryan Tannehill is the consistency
Yeah.
may not even be there. And we're talking about a guy who was getting every other game a touchdown, right? His first 3 years with Tennessee, he was averaging 0.51 touchdowns per game on the ground.
Yeah.
And he just hasn't given you that. I mean, he's got 3 touchdowns on the ground in his last 15 games. So you can do quick math, right? I mean, 1 out of 5 versus 1 out of 2. I mean, that will make a huge difference for fantasy. And with the passing game just not being there anymore for him, the line not being great, the bottom fell out for Ryan Tannehill. So for that reason, combined with his age, the way the team's going, I want nothing to do with him at this point.
Yeah, if they keep losing games, they're gonna throw Malik Willis or Will Levis in there at some point, and I mean, it's hard to imagine it being
Not great.
worse for the offense, but it probably will be worse once those guys are in there. So it's hard to envision relying on Hopkins or Henry down the stretch. I mean, forget Burks or Chikakonkwo; those guys are not going to be integral parts of your championship run. But those veterans, I don't even know if they're good buys for contenders, just because it could be really, really rough by the time playoff weeks roll around. I'm comfortable taking less than a first for Henry. I would be looking to pivot into, man, I don't even know at this point.
It depends. You'd have to go a buy low wide receiver, right? Like a Jahan Dotson, I would take over Derrick Henry. And Jahan Dotson right now is going
Yeah.
for. I'll bring up Jahan Dotson later when we get on our buys and sells, but like he's been going for it less than that first. So that's cool for me as a potential pivot. I will say if you can throw a second for Treylon Burks at points of this season, because I don't expect production to come at any point. People might just be totally over Treylon Burks by week 8 or 9. I'll send a second for him.
I think people
The
are
one
just
player.
about over him already. I think people are
So
I'm just about over him already.
just
I
about, but
mean,
a second. I'll take the risk on a second.
he's recovering from an injury, so you can give him a little bit of grace there. But I mean, 16% target share, 1.36 yards per out run is just absolutely brutal. I mean, he is not living up to expectations.
No.
I'll give him a couple more weeks to get healthy, but I don't know. I think we might have been just a little overexcited about Burke. I mean, I liked him as a prospect, but I think we're maybe seeing that he had some limitations. I think Marquise Brown is a guy you could maybe try to trade Derrick Henry for.
I would do that as well. Any
Yeah,
of those wide receivers, right? I think Deontay Johnson, you might even be able to get a little bit of an incentive on top. I'm still making that move. I know he's turning 27. Pickens is looking solid. Pickett is not, but Deontay Johnson's still that target earner for me. Your PPR leagues, I still value him as like wide receiver 3 flex player for a few years. So it's just another name out there. I always have him next to Hollywood.
well, let's just jump right into the buys then, because I have Marquise Brown as a buy. You've got Deontay Johnson as a buy. And we'll just transition right into that segment. That's enough airtime for the Tennessee Titans. And their whole disaster. So we like these two wide receivers. I'm guessing for similar reasons. They're both proven target earners. They're kind of in that middle part of their careers where they're not really ascending, but they're not necessarily falling off yet. They're just kind of steady. They both kind of hover in that 26-27% target share range. They haven't really been able to put a lot of those full seasons together for different reasons, injuries, bad offenses. But they both have a lot of potential. I like Marquise Brown because, look, Kyler Murray's probably coming back at some point this year. The offense has already looked better than I expected under Josh Dobbs, which makes me even more excited about Kyler Murray returning. And he's had a 33% target share or better in the last 2 weeks. Like, he is the focal point of that offense. So Michael Wilson is not a target earner. Rondale Moore is a gadget player. Zach Ertz is on life support. I mean, Marquise Brown is the guy in that offense. So I think he could be a very strong play down the stretch. And I think Deontay Johnson could too, coming back off of an injury. I'm a little bit less excited about that offense. But why don't you sell us on Deontay as a buy?
Yeah, it's everything you were just saying with Marquise Hollywood Brown. The difference for me is I prefer Hollywood Brown because I see more ceiling within the offense. I think the offense is going to get better in Arizona quicker than it's going to get better in Pittsburgh because Arizona has a legitimate quarterback in the wings, and they have been somewhat competent as a team thus far, surprisingly. So Deontay Johnson is just the targeter, and he's been 25 to 30% of the team targets every single year since he took over when Juju got hurt when he was a rookie. So he's just been that dude. He'll continue to be that dude. It's not like the highest ceiling if the touchdowns aren't there, which we saw last year. That's the absolute floor. If the touchdowns are there, we're talking like 6, what you would expect on his typical volume. He's going to be a high-end wide receiver or a mid wide receiver 2 at worst. So that's just kind of where I view him. Same with Hollywood Brown. I prefer Hollywood Brown a little bit more. I think there's a little bit more of the downfield threat. I think there's a little bit more potential of targets earned in that offense. And I will throw in your number 2 in that offense is Michael Wilson. So if he's a guy you can throw in for free onto a trade, he's a guy that I would stash because he could potentially put up a little bit more production if/when Arizona gets cooking with a real quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big believer in him as a prospect, but when you have a guy, he's running all the routes that early, there's always going to be some potential there for growth, especially if it's a good quarterback he's working with.
I liked Michael Wilson weeks as a prospect. I don't think he's one of those guys who didn't jump out on the stat sheets because he was just injured. He was hurt for the majority of college, but the one full season he put together, which was at a solid age, it was fantastic. I know it was at Stanford, but he looked really, really solid. It's just because of the injury he had before that, the injury he had after that.
Yeah.
But he went higher in the draft than people would have expected. He was a day 2 guy. It's not like he was completely off the map, Michael Wilson, right? The draft capital was better than we would have expected, and he had that one good season in college. Again, you only had to invest a 4th round pick into him. I actually liked Michael Wilson. He's looked fine thus far. The offense just hasn't been there, but his target share has been absolutely adequate. And he's kind of an under the radar ad.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Definitely a good guy to stash. He had a big play last week too. I think Deontay is probably the cheaper of these two between him and Hollywood right now because he's been on IR, which makes him, even more of an appealing ad. But I definitely like both these guys. I have another rookie tight end that I think is a good buy while everybody's chasing after Sam LaPorta, as they should be. Luke Musgrave has quietly been very impressive to start the year. He's running 76% of the routes in Green Bay. He's had a 16% target share for them. He has a total of 11 receptions through 3 games. Very promising stuff. This is all good stuff for the beginning of a rookie tight end's career. It's not Sam LaPorta good. It's not like, oh my gosh, this guy's a superstar, but it is very solid. It's what you want to see. So I think he's a good guy to buy into, maybe before his price rises too much. And, I'd rather have him than Michael Mayer at this point. I'd be willing to kind of buy into him even at a higher price than he was worth in rookie drafts, which was like an early 3rd. I would trade a late 2nd or even a mid 2nd for him. I would trade Desmond Ridder for him straight up. I'd trade like an Isaiah Pacheco type, like an RB, like a low end RB2 kind of guy for him. So I'm pretty high on Musgrave, and I like what I've seen from him so far.
Yeah, I think he's a fine buy. Like I like Luke Musgrave. You can't really argue what he's done this far. The target volume has been just fine. It's been just enough to be a high tight end too, which for what it's worth, I guess is valuable to an extent. Last week, I mean, he did have a good amount of targets, but it wasn't a game where their top 2 offensive options weren't there. But I'm not going to knock it because you still got to earn those targets, and it was against the Saints, which is a legit defense, a legit top 10 defense, and they typically are a stout versus the tight end position. So he did well there. Credit to him. My problem here in general is just a process thing with sending seconds or potential starters for a tight end. I don't know if they do it. I would send Ridder. I think that's absolutely fine. I'd be cool making a player pivot. I don't know if I'd probably want to plus on top of Pacheco just because of the perception people have around him, what he could give you on a weekly basis as kind of like, RB2 production. So I'm probably asking for a little bit more on top of there. I think Luke Musgrave is fine. I had him as like the 305 in my rookie rankings. I'd be cool moving him to maybe the late 2nd on paper. I just don't love sending draft capital for tight ends that aren't actually top producers in my team right now. And even then, unless you are Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, I'm not giving premium draft capital. So typically I want to explore anything that's not my actual draft capital if I'm going to try to go after Luke Musgrave. And unfortunately, the Luke Musgrave owners believe in him, or maybe they didn't, and they just happen to be like, this is the next tight end. And with the way he's been producing, you're not going to get a good deal for him, right? So it's like, how do you get Luke Musgrave in a trade where I'm comfortable with the cost? I'm not sure you can do that right now, unless if he's part of a package where you're like, you know what will get this over the line for you? And then I come and say, put Luke Musgrave in there. I'll throw you back a fourth. We'll make that swap at the end, and that makes me happy with the deal. Then cool, like throw him into deals that way. Maybe go for a different player. Chalk up a parallel. Maybe you view two players exactly the same, and you know the other manager really likes the guy that you view the same as someone in his roster. Go make that parallel. It's just a decoy. It's just smoke. And then be like, you know what? I know you like this guy. If we do a third for Luke Musgrave on top of it, the deal's done. And maybe that's how you end up technically getting him for a little cheaper than that second. But I just don't love him in principle shooting seconds for tight end twos.
I like that trade strategy. I think that's a great way to go about it. And I do prefer sending players rather than draft picks when I can. But that being said, I will give you the green light, listeners. If you have a late second, you're a contender, you have my permission to go and send that for Musgrave. I think he's going to be worth more than that by the time the offseason rolls around and people start looking at the peripherals. I mean, everybody was drooling over Chigakonkwo, couldn't even get on the field as a rookie. He just made a couple of big plays. I think we're going to see the hype train start rolling. He does have some pretty significant athleticism, so I'm high on him, but I like what Schuyler's saying.
I'll give you 3 veterans you can pivot off, and there's a small chance you might even be able to get a third or a fourth run on top of these veterans. The 3 guys: Darren Waller, you can probably make a move for, James Conner, and Michael Thomas. Those are 3 players where I think to a competitor who has Luke Musgrave, who he's not hitting their lineup, they would be interested in the hear you out at worst, a straight pivot for any of those 3 guys. And at best, you might end even getting a little bit of a top. I would start with throwing a third on top of Musgrave to send any of those guys and just see what the response is like, because I think that gets done to a lot of competitors.
I agree with you. I think you definitely could get that done. I probably still prefer Waller straight up, but I like that if I'm rebuilding. I like that kind of a swap, and I would be looking to get a plus. I think those are good guys to look at. This is the right time. You know, if you started 0-3, I'm not saying it's over for you, but it is the time to really start look in the mirror and say, okay, what do I have to do with this team? Like, am I just unlucky? Do I have, JT and Cup coming back or whatever? Or like, is this team, there are significant holes here? Because that's when you need to start considering making those pivots, sending the pieces to those contenders, because you do have leverage, but eventually the leverage does start to run out and it flips the other way. If you wait too long and you become desperate to get rid of those pieces so you can properly tank, other teams are going to catch on to that. So this is 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, that's the time of the season where you need to start making these moves where it's like, okay, contending piece for rebuilding piece, and making those swaps so that your roster construction just is a little more consistent. So I think those deals make sense. On the other end of the spectrum, I think Travis Kelce is worth a buy if you're a contender. And I mean, that seems obvious. Like, Travis Kelce is the kind of guy you want on a contender, but I think the way that we've seen the tight end position pan out thus far this season makes him even more valuable, because so many top tight ends have been disappointing. Like George Kittle, Pat Freiermuth, Darren Waller, Dallas Fraudert, as you call him. None of those guys have lived up to their fantasy expectations. Even Mark Andrews has been a little slow. He missed the first game. He was kind of underwhelming last week. That just makes Kelce all the more appealing to a contender, because you're adding more positional advantage on top. Like, I don't know if that trend will hold the whole season, but other than TJ Hawkinson and somehow Sam LaPorta, there's really nobody at tight end that's producing right now. And that makes me very interested in going out and trying to pick up Travis Kelce.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that time of the year, guys, where if you want to win a championship, you are going to the Travis owner if they do not plan on winning themselves, and you're seeing what on top of your first gets it done for Travis Kelce, right?
Exactly.
So maybe you put Luke Musgrave and a third, or Luke Musgrave and a Kyron Williams, and then you add your first and you go and you get Travis Swift and you get it done. You push it over the line and you get him on your team. I mean, he wins championships.
You're not going to win the championship if you get rid of Kyron Williams. He's the key to the whole thing, man.
Oh, right. Well, we'll talk about him in just a second. Yeah, Travis Kelce, as I told you, I think he's still got another 2 years of being that dude. And past that, I think he tries to play even further down the line. We'll just see what he is at that point.
Yeah. So I like Kelsey. He's usually on a team that's looking to win because that's who's always trying to get him in the first place. So you have to see. But if the team that has him, that even if they were trying to win, maybe they are 0-3, or maybe they're on the bubble right now, and you can convince them to kind of turn their team in another direction. So it's worth, sending out some feeler offers. Do you have any other buys for us, Schuyler?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about everyone. The last name I'll throw is just Brees Hall. I think in general, if there's anyone who's been panicking to this point with an elite level athlete, an elite level prospect, not doing it after his first 4 games off an ACL, sure, I think that's a little buy window. Like if you can take De'Von Achane out of first and go get Brees Hall, I'm making that deal yesterday. So I guess that's the last name I throw out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think you'd have to go that far with it the way Hall's value. I mean, I traded Nico Collins in a first for Brees Hall a couple of days ago,
Smash.
and that was in a league full of, I mean, I think very sharp owners, and I think that's kind of where the value has settled right now. People are a little bit frustrated. They look at the Jets offense; it's kind of a hopeless looking situation.
Absolutely.
People are ready to kind of give up prematurely on this, and you can get into Brees Hall at lower prices. So that's a good call out. I don't know if the buy window for Jahmyr Gibbs has crept open yet or not. I
It'll
think
never be there.
it's worth looking. I mean, he's had a little bit of a slow start. He's 32nd in points per game. This was a guy with pretty high, expectations out of the gate. He was going round 3 in redraft and best ball. I already have a lot of shares of Gibbs, and I haven't really sent out offers yet this week. But I'm going to send out some more offers for him and just kind of see if people are discouraged. But that he's really good. He's really, really good. Detroit is still kind of figuring out how to use him effectively. They're just using him in strange ways right now where like they should obviously be throwing him the ball, and instead they're giving him 18 carries, but they're willing to give him the ball a lot. And that was encouraging to see in week 3. And I have no doubts about him long term. So
no, he's been good. He's been effective on the ground. He just didn't score a touchdown last week, and the passing volume just wasn't what we want it to be. But he had to step in and play a bigger role on the ground. So they were making up for his pass work elsewhere in the offense. So I'm not worried, and I still think out there he's viewed. Everyone still has him in their top 5. I think at minimum. I think there's going to be people out there who have him as high as 3 in their rankings with Brees Hall, maybe sliding down. I disagree with that, but I just don't think that there's a buy window here for Jahmyr Gibbs. The only way, again, if I can add a De'Von Achane and go get Jahmyr Gibbs, absolutely. Right.
Wait, who else is in your top 3 if not Hall and Gibbs?
Oh, you got Christian McCaffrey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, his contract is structured in a way where the team really has no liability if he were to have an injury, no loyalties. They can get out of him for zero money at any point. I think that probably works best for both sides there with him. He's producing as the running back 1. With the way they're using the offense, I don't even feel worried about him getting injured based on a workload. It'd have to be something that's kind of out of our control. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey is going to win leagues this year. He could win leagues next year. And then at that point, he's still 28, and there's plenty of backs we see, especially with the pass receiving ability he has, who give us another year or 2 of lesser production, but still some value thereafter. So Christian McCaffrey, there's no way Christian McCaffrey's outside your top 3. If you have Christian McCaffrey outside your top 3, you're too galaxy brain. Like Jahmyr Gibbs, exciting prospect, sub 200-pound back who's going to give 15 to 20 touches a game to Dave Montgomery's plotter, and he could be a back end RB2 most weeks. What are we doing here? Like, I love Jahmyr Gibbs, but if you're telling me you're going to take Jahmyr Gibbs over Christian McCaffrey, I'm going to tell you just don't want to win championships. Like, at some point, guys, we need to score points. Right. And Christian McCaffrey scoring all of the points. Like, this has been a guy that should never have slid down people's rankings. Like, what are we doing here?
So do you have CMC at 2, RB2 right now?
Do I have CMC? Yeah, I have CMC at 2 behind Bijan, and then I have Brees Hall, and then I have a little bit of a gap. And then the next group of guys, I think you can put in any order. Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne. I think they're all there. And then after that, I'm a little more nervous with like Saquon Eckler kind of as a group after that, more the win now window guys. Yeah, I'm sure maybe you're a little higher on Jahmyr Gibbs.
I'm higher on Gibbs. Yeah,
like, what is higher? Like, I have him at RB4. Like, that's I feel like you cannot go higher than RB4.
I have him above all the other guys you said. Like, I have him separate comfortably ahead of Walker, Etienne, Taylor. Like I would much rather have Gibbs than those guys. But I
I
hear
just
you.
think the points, like again,
Mhm.
what
I
points are
think
they
we'll
going to
see that.
score over the
I
next
think
two
by the end of the
years?
season, I think by the end of the season, we're going to see. I think we'll see Gibbs scoring a lot of points. He has
Like,
already
yeah,
had a game with 9 targets. I think by the end of the year, I'm not going to be surprised if he's like an RB1 in weekly rankings. I think that's
sure, but like him as an RB1 of weekly rankings, I mean, we have 55 points through 3 games from Kenneth Walker. Like, what more do people want at this point? I know
well.
there
I mean,
was I know that there was well, you're going to tell me that Zach Charbonnet worries you? He's got Dave Montgomery,
the
who's
exact
better
thing I
than
was
Zach
going to say
Charbonnet. Like,
is
what are
that
you doing?
I mean, look, we're on the weeds now, but Zach Charbonnet played like 44% of the snaps this week. I mean, Kenneth Walker scored 2 touchdowns. That's fine, but he's never going to be a high volume pass catcher. I think Gibbs has way
I've
more
seen 10
upside, and
targets through
he's
three
younger.
games,
He's
right?
got
I think
first
that's
round draft
fine.
capital.
I'm
I
not
think,
saying to take Walker over Gibbs. I'm just saying to
yeah,
tell me that Gibbs is that tier is the difference of almost a first to a lot of manners. If you're telling me Gibbs is worth like a first more than
yeah.
Kenneth Walker,
I wouldn't
we
trade a
need to
first
make the
on one.
trade.
No, I wouldn't trade a first on top of him, but I would trade a second. I would trade a second on top of him for Gibbs. But look, maybe I'm crazy. I could be crazy. I wouldn't be surprised. I have you have any idea how many Kyle Pitts shares I have? I probably have no idea how to play this stupid game. I don't know. But I do like Gibbs. I get what you're saying with McCaffrey, and that makes a lot of sense. You know, I totally justify on a contender making that type of a deal. He's insane right now. His role is frankly a lot bigger than I thought. I thought they were going to scale him back, play more Elijah Mitchell. I probably thought that because they told us that to our faces and then didn't do it. But that's the reality of the situation. So let's flip on over to the sell side. You got our boy here, De'Von Achane, in your cells. You've been talking about it all show. Sell
Yeah,
Achane for this guy, for that guy. Try to upgrade. So I think we've kind of beaten that into the ground. But you have some
absolutely.
other running backs here. So why don't
Yeah.
you walk us through these other guys that you're trying to move off of?
Yeah, I'll walk him through real quick. I think Kyron Williams. Now, this is a take that maybe would have been a little different a week ago because he didn't give us a fantastic week last week. He still had 17 opportunities, he still 7 targets, and only led to 7.5 fantasy points. He didn't get that touchdown that we've gotten every game since. But if a manager hasn't really dipped down on him, I still think there's a lot of room here. He is purely a stopgap production type running back. I think there's no way we don't enter next year with legitimate competition for him in that backfield where he was a day 3 guy. Again, we really liked Kyron Williams in college as a guy who was an effective runner. He could do a little bit of everything, great at nothing. He was the best pass blocker in his class, so it got him out on the field. There were a lot of good things with Kyron Williams, but then, of course, it might have been the worst combine I've ever seen. Guy absolutely face planted,
Yeah,
just slow, short, not even like there was nothing good about that combine form. That's why he dipped down, but he's a competent player. Do I think he's going to be a world beater fantasy asset? I don't personally think so, but for redraft leagues and the short term, he's going to plug an RB2 spot, which is great. But as any team that's not winning a championship now, I'm cashing out at anything that resembles even close to a first because I just don't
yeah,
think that I think that's absolutely ridiculous. A second right now, just based on the market, seems to be selling low. I think it's totally fair, right? I made a trade this week. I traded Kyron Williams and a 3rd-round pick for Jahan Dotson and a 4th-round pick. So
very
that's a
solid.
deal that gets done. Again, all the wide receivers we keep bringing up, Deontay Johnson, Marquise Brown, Jahan Dotson, like go make those deals. If you could somehow trade like 2 seconds of Kyron Williams, go get Jackson Smith and Jigba right now because of his slow start, sprint to make that deal. I'm not saying I would do that, but again, somebody in your league might entertain it if they really need a running back. A lot of managers are struggling with running backs due to all the injuries we've seen thus far. The next guy, Alvin Kamara, who's on the list, I just think there's a good chance he could be dust. Coming off this, a lot of teams with their injury needs, you might be able to get an Alvin Kamara for, again, that whole group of wide receivers we just mentioned. You might be able to do a 1-for-1. I'm running to make that done. The last guy was A.J. Dillon. I just threw him in there because he's a roster clogger at this point for me. 2 weeks without Aaron Jones, 2 weeks where he didn't end up giving startable production. I'd sell him for any second. I'd put him on the block, say first
Yeah,
person to send me a second in any year, and he's yours.
yeah, I agree.
I just want him shipped off.
AJ Dillon is dead to me. He didn't even get the passing down snaps. They were playing Patrick Taylor in basically a 50-50 split with
Straight
him.
off the
And if
practice
you
squad,
just said
Patrick Taylor.
who is Patrick Taylor, that's the whole point. Why
Yeah.
like the whole thesis of the play is, oh my gosh, one day Aaron Jones might not be in the picture and then AJ Dillon's going to go crazy. He's not going to go crazy. Apparently he's not any good. So what there's nothing to hold for at this point. Like what
Yeah.
there's nothing to hope for. We're seeing him right now as the main guy and he can't distance himself from Patrick Taylor or score any fantasy
Yeah,
points.
Taylor's that dude
So
who, like, every team seems to have this guy that is on the practice squad, and then they call him up when there's injuries, and then he goes right back, right? Like the Bengals, you've got Travion Williams on
yeah,
the Lions, you've got Craig Reynolds. Like it's that guy for the Packers, Patrick Taylor. Like he's literally a nobody. So if you are
yeah.
giving away snaps to Patrick Taylor, you are not a a fantasy asset that I care about.
Especially when you're a guy who's literally been on the team for years and is supposed to
Years.
be like the heir apparent. So I agree with you there. With Kyron, I'm with you. Like I'm fine holding on to him if you're using him. You know, you maybe have a zero RB build like this. That's the whole point of stashing running backs is you get them and they can help you in your contention window. But with the way that the price is creeping up, you have to go and look around and see what you can get. And then if you do trade him for a haul, you just patch that hole some other way. You have mentioned Jahan Dotson a few times throughout the show, so I'd love to just go off on that rabbit trail for a second. I do like Jahan Dotson. I was into him coming into the season. He has struggled thus far, hasn't cracked 10 points in a game so far. Are you just putting all of that on Howell and just the general dysfunction of the offense?
Yeah, I think Dotson's like a fine stash. I've given up hope that he's going to be a difference maker this year for lineups, but I still think this is where you go in and you get just talented wide receivers who are on a dip. You stash a bunch of these guys on your bench, and you're going to have years where multiple end up breaking out or hitting better. And then you can sell and flip with these wide receiver 2, 3s. Like, again, if you continuously buy them when they're down,
Yeah.
the talented ones, not stopgap production, not Darnell Mooney got 140 targets because there's literally nobody else. You got to recognize stopgap production versus legitimate long-term viable options. And I think Jahan Dawson's still that player. I think he's talented. I think he's a great separation wide receiver, an elite target earner. He's got that touchdown upside we talked about with guys like Tyler Lockett. Hopefully Josh Allen can be that kind of player as well. I just really still like Jahan Dawson. He's our guy. We had him as our wide receiver 5 in his class at the rookie 107, right after Chris Olave, before that whole slew of George Pickens, Christian Watson, James Cook, Jameson Williams. So we were really high on him here at JWB. We still love Jahan Dawson. He's our guy. I just think he's a fine stash. I think he's a good dip. You're getting him at a second plus right now,
Yeah.
like roughly around there. And I'm going and investing in this player. It might end up being that Terry McLaurin arc, but you know, at points, if he ends up being a wide receiver 3 at seasons, there's still value there, and you're buying him at a better price than that. So I guess that's the pitch for Jahan Dotson. It's a bet on talent. You're stashing him away. If you're a competitor now, I'm not giving up maybe viable production asset to go get him. But if you have excess and you're just identifying, how do I get rid of this excess, right? You're like, how do I get rid of AJ Dillon? No one give me a second. Well, maybe there's another player on your bench, a wide receiver who's giving production now, and you throw him with AJ Dillon and go get Jahan Dotson. So it's just a good name I like to pivot in right now because the production hasn't been there, but I still believe in the player.
I think the price point is probably coming down to a place where he is a savvy buy. Not as worried about him as somebody like Treylon Burks at this point. So I'm willing to buy in for sure. We'll end the show here with one of my sells. I'm fine going out on this one. This is really the main one for me. The other one I was going to say is just everyone on the Panthers. They threw 58 passes last week, and some guys had good production, predictably, because that's what happens when you throw 58 passes. They're going to play the rest of the year with a rookie quarterback. None of them are especially talented. I would just flip those guys for, whatever you can get. But the main player here I'm talking about is Jordan Love as a sell. Look, I was wrong about Jordan Love to an extent, as I was saying to sell him all offseason, because he has seen a significant jump in value since the beginning of the year. And that's something that you could have realized if you had held on to Jordan Love. So I will say that I was wrong. However, Jordan Love has not immediately been transformed into like the truth, like some kind of franchise quarterback. He has a 7% touchdown rate, which is cool. It's helping him score fantasy points. When you look deeper than that, it's really a little underwhelming. He's 36th in completion percentage over expectation right now. That's worse than Justin Fields and Desmond Ridder. He's 3rd in turnover worthy play rate. So that's sandwiched between Sam Howell and Justin Fields. He's 8th in off target throw percentage, and his actual just regular completion percentage is 53.7. I mean, he has not really been an efficient thrower. He's been chucking it deep, which is part of the low completion percentage, but he has not been some kind of otherworldly quarterback. There's definitely some flaws here that are still showing themselves. And when he stops throwing 3 touchdowns every game, people are going to realize that. And I don't know how much of I don't know if he's going to actually be a guy you want to start all year, because the passing volume isn't really there. He's been hovering around like 30 pass attempts per game. It's really just been these passing touchdowns. So I'm concerned about his production, and I'm also concerned about his actual skill level when you look beyond just the counting stats.
Yeah, no, it's hard for me to argue with you. We've been low here at JWB on Jordan Love throughout the entire offseason as well. I think, right, his touchdown percentage was boosting him. He's at 7.3% touchdown percentage, which Aaron Rodgers for his entire career has been better than that mark over the course of the season twice. So unless you think that Jordan Love is going to be MVP candidate the rest of the year, I mean, we got to expect some regression there in terms of what we can expect in the touchdown department based on his passing volume. So with Jordan Love, I think it was a couple softer matchups. I'll give it to him because one positive thing is he got a little bit done with his legs on the ground versus a legitimate defense. And that's something I'll give you guys for your Jordan Love support, which is why he's not like a must sell. But him being viewed as like quarterback 12, I don't even have to add anything to turn him into CJ Stroud. Like CJ Stroud is just a better bet based on what we know for him or what we expect from him as a prospect. And if I would add a second to move from Jordan Love to CJ Stroud, I feel safer there. You can trade Jordan Love for Bryce Young straight up. You can trade him for Kyler Murray straight up, Justin Fields straight up. I'm making all of those deals right now. I just see more upside. Even when we say we're not buying Justin Fields, I'm going to take that shot over Jordan Love.
Yeah, that's where I would be looking. I'd be trying to upgrade him into another quarterback. Fields would be my last ditch effort.
Absolutely, last.
But I would definitely go look into all those quarterbacks you mentioned. See what you'd have to add to go get Dak Prescott, or cheer down to Geno Smith plus a second, or
I think you do better than that. Honestly,
yeah,
right now it's looking like you can get a late first for him. You can get a late first for him. Late first Derek Carr, Stafford, Mac Jones for love, and I'm taking.
I would much rather do that because I genuinely think you're looking more like low end QB2 production the rest of the season. The rest of the numbers, other than just the passing touchdowns, indicate that he's probably more like a QB20 type of guy the rest of the year, not like a top 8 quarterback like he's been through 3 weeks. He's got like 215 passing yards per game. He's doing a little bit on the ground, kind of Tannehill-esque mobility there. So I think this is a guy you want to at least look around and see what kind of deal you can get, because he is at a high point. I don't think he's going to go to 0. Like, he's going to start the rest of the year. He'll have other big games, but definitely a guy on my radar. I only have 1 share, so I don't have a lot of work to do. But if you have, Jordan Love bags you've been holding on to, now I think is the time to go and explore your trade options. That'll bring us to the end here of the Dynasty breakdown and reactions from week 3. There was a lot to talk about. I'm sure we missed a bunch of stuff, but those were the big ones. Schuyler, thanks a lot for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. It's been a good conversation. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_DFF. You can follow Schuyler on Twitter at DFF Buffalo. Why don't you let the people know what you got going on at JWB and anything else?
Yeah, check us out, JWB Fantasy Football, on all platforms. We've been doing like 7 videos a day on the YouTube channel over there. Just been grinding. We have 11 to 12 full shows a week for you guys, so nearly 2 a day throughout the week. It comes out to around 4.5 hours worth of shows when you go at the end of the week on Saturday, Sunday, when I post them all into one. So come give us a chance and check us out. Thanks for having me on, Paul. It was a great time talking to you, despite being slightly concussed and trying to like keep my focus on the screen. I really enjoyed the conversation. I could sit here and talk to you for another hour and a half if I could. So
yeah, man, we'll definitely try to do it again sometime. You guys are absolutely just hustling and grinding over there, putting out so much content, and it's good stuff. I've actually been on the show twice. Apparently those were the 2 best episodes, I think, in their history, but the other ones are good too. Definitely worth checking out. You guys have like that clip library thing, that content. How does that work? You have so clips for different players.
Right. So I kind of like view this as something I thought of last year that I'm like, nobody really has this. Let me go try to put it together. So you can find a description of every single one of our videos. It's a clips catalog. It's just a Google sheet where I have every single player alphabetical, and then the dates of their videos chronologically. It's just hyperlinked into the date next to their names. And then it's broken up by our ramp up to redraft. So if you want to see what we were saying about these players for redraft in the off season, to come check us, do a little auditing. It's there for you, all organized alphabetically, chronologically. Then for in season, it's instead of putting the date, I just put the week, so you know what week the take is. Hey, do we have a week 4 take on Jordan Love yet? Yep, you can click on it, brings you right to a clip for that player. And then Dynasty. So if you want to go back, you're like, what were they saying about this guy in March? What were they saying about him in May? What were they saying about him in September? You can go. All the dates are there. We're full transparency here, right? When we have a take, we have almost 700 clips in just the Dynasty part of that catalog alone for this year, which is like 250 players. So we love people coming and telling us when we're wrong, because if I have to give a take on 250 players, I'm gonna be wrong once or 12 times, So
Yeah.
So it's a useful tool. I like it. Appreciate the shout out. But yeah, guys, it's a lot of extra little work to do at the end, but it's worth it for me.
I just thought it was so cool when I saw it. I had to shout that out because I haven't. I mean, nobody else is doing that, so it is a really cool idea. So yeah, go check out that content over there, guys. And if you can, subscribe to the YouTube channel here at DFF. We're not doing 11 shows a week, but I'm here every week. We've got some bonus clips from the podcast that go up there pretty frequently, and then other videos as well, rankings, updates, things like that. So go check that out. Follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if that's more your speed. Either way, I'll be here every week throughout the season with other cool guests, and you'll probably hear Schuyler again soon. So that'll do it for us here. We'll see you guys after week 4.